This is the Five Lights Podcast.
Yes, it is the Five Lights Podcast, and I'm your host, Daniel Herrick, and welcome to episode 14 of the Five Lights Podcast, a Spanish Grand Prix review. I don't know if that was a very good Spanish accent. It was some sort of accent anyway, and I put lots of emphasis on R's, so whether that's any good. But anyway, we're going to get into the Spanish Grand Prix. Not a great race for on-the-track action, but a really tasty race as Nico Rosberg picks up his first win of the season and is closing the gap on his teammate Lewis Hamilton. And the Ferraris may have been far behind, but they're still in the mix. So, let's get into it without any further ado. Let's get going. And that, once again, was our intro by bensound.com, your one-stop shop for all your music multimedia needs. So, I don't do this podcast on my own. I need someone to help me break down the Spanish Grand Prix, because you'd all be sick of my voice by the end of this. He is my brother, my friend, my compadre. I'm looking forward to camping with him in a manly way, not a Brokeback Mountain way, when we go to Silverstone later in the year. He is the James Hunt to my Murray Walker. Ben, how you doing?
I'm not sure my voice is much better than yours, but I'm good, thanks. Pretty damn hungry. But yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, so your hunger, is that an excuse for later races then? Because you've obviously not had any dinner yet.
It's probably, top two on the list of reasons why the races should be starting later, about 4 o'clock. So I'll put that to Bernie at some point this week, maybe in my Biting Point blog.
Yeah, Biting Point. Hunger Point.
Hunger Point blog, yeah.
Hunger Point, yeah. So what, you said it's one of the top two reasons. What's the other reason?
Just convenience, really.
Convenience.
Just slap bang in the middle. Why can't, end of the day, as we discussed previously, you can do stuff beforehand, like with the family and stuff. Sure.
Well, did you enjoy the race there, Ben? Just quickly before we get too deep into it, what are your initial thoughts?
I enjoyed the race. As you said, not that great for on-track action. It was racing and overtaking was mainly just because of DRS, but in terms of strategy and technically, it was a very good race, and I enjoyed it. And there was always something going on, either on the radio or in terms of strategy that you had to follow and focus on, which is probably why I'm so hungry.
You got many notes there? You got many notes in your notepad?
I've got, this week, 3 pages of A5, which is the most I've ever had on a race.
Wow. Well, there you go. Well, I'm using my new Badger GP notepad, which got sent to me when I signed up to a pro thing on their website, so badgergp.com. So I'm using that, and I filled quite a few pages. There's quite a bit to get to. So should we get to it? But first, before we do get to it, if you enjoyed the Spanish Grand Prix and it did whet your appetite and you're thinking, I fancy going to a Grand Prix this season, maybe the British Grand Prix in Silverstone, or maybe you fancy joining our friends over in Toronto at the Flat Out Fever podcast and going to the Grand Prix at Montreal, or maybe even the next Grand Prix in Monaco if you're so inclined, well, you can do. Head over to our website, fivelightspodcast.com, and on the 2015 calendar tab at the top there, if you click on that, you will see a full listing of all the races this season, a 2015 calendar. Click on the race that interests you the most, or you want to go to, or you want to buy tickets for a family member, like my family did for me, because they're the best. And then you can go to that race. Thanks to bookf1.com, go via our website, and you can get tickets to any race left this season. You can also get tickets to MotoGP, and they do experience days as well, which you've also got a tab for. So head over to our website and click on the 2015 calendar and the Experience Days tab, and you will find a whole plethora of interesting things there. So let's get into the race then, shall we, Benj? The Spanish Grand Prix. I'm going to give a quick recap of what happened. A really interesting start, a good qualifying yesterday, Rosberg taking pole, and he makes a great start, but Hamilton, who started in second, doesn't, and is overtaken by Vettel into the first corner in the Ferrari, pushing him back into third. Raikkonen also got a good start from 7th place, managing on the first lap to end up in 5th by the end. Hamilton is struggling in the turbulent air of Vettel, struggles to get past him, couldn't get close to him, and then when he finally does get close to him, has to pit. And in that pit stop, there's a problem on the left rear tyre for Hamilton. So he comes out behind Vettel again, so the undercut doesn't work. They try again to get him on the track, but Hamilton switches his strategy from a 2-stop to a 3-stop. And in that middle stop, he manages to jump the Ferrari driver and pull away and open up a big enough gap to finish in second place with Vettel in third. Raikkonen struggling, went onto the hard tyre, managed to go a little bit longer, but just struggled in traffic all day today. So he finished in 5th behind Bottas. And meanwhile, McLaren and the Alonso incident there, with Alonso retiring with brake problems after nearly wiping out the Jackman, and Button struggling all day long with rear grip and all sorts of problems there for Button. So that was really the race from the British perspective and the front. We're going to go in a little bit more in depth because there's a lot more than that happened. Loads more than that happened. So Benj, why don't you start? I was a little bit late to the party, nearly missed the start of the race. So why don't you start with lap 1 and that start there for Hamilton getting bogged down?
Well, even before that, if I may, because I love the news so much. There was a few news items that occurred before the race started, so I'll get to them. The FIA announced that they were going to monitor fuel pressure a bit more closely this race because apparently they feel that people have been a bit naughty and are getting around the fuel flow limit way in a manner that's not so sporting. So they monitored that. I don't know what will come of that at all. Hockenheim have striked a deal with Bernie Eccleston to host the race in Germany next year.
Whoopee!
So that will be happening, as we thought it probably would.
Good.
And I think that's it, really, in terms of news items. I mean, the one thing that did kind of come out to me as well before the race started is on the warm-up lap, Lewis was going quite slow. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was probably a ploy to get Rosberg sat on his pole slot a bit too long, and therefore his tyres would cool down and not give him the grip that he needs to start. But that didn't really work out as you say, because Rosberg got away quite well and Lewis got a lot of wheel spin and fell behind slightly and had to settle for third by the first corner, and he had to even cover off Bottas as well. Yeah,
he was getting attacked quite readily, and Anthony Davidson played it back on the old video thing on the Sky Sports coverage there, and you could hear the car dropping down and bogging down, and he nearly got caught by Bottas. Vettel making a very good start, but it sort of almost proves what I said as in the previous podcast, where I said qualifying is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all, because you can have those mistakes, and Raikkonen's proved as well with his great start for obviously qualifying poorly in 7th. By the end of the first lap, he was back up to 5th place, having taken over the two Toro Rossos, who had a bit of a torrid afternoon. Maybe a setup problem there for the two Toro Rossos?
Yeah, well, I think mainly they were punching a bit above their weight for qualifying. They had an amazing qualifying, started 5th and 6th on the grid. And obviously Raikkonen and Massa qualified out of position, so they were bound to then catch the Toro Rossos and give them a hard time, which they did. And both Raikkonen and Massa passed them quite early on, I think, by the opening 4 laps. Toro Rossos even had fallen back quite a bit by then, and then that they caught into a pack where the Lotuses were, and then they started getting quite antsy with one another, didn't they?
They did get very frisky. Before we get into that though, Ben, just something I noticed. I picked it up on the replay, the overhead shot. I love the overhead shot at the start. Obviously, all 20 cars got away. They all got through clearly. There was no collisions. But did you notice just how far behind the Marussias were the rest of the 18 cars in front of them? By the time the car in 18th place had gone through the first corner, the Marussias had only just arrived there. They were so far behind speed-wise. That's a little bit worrying for the Marussias, because yes, obviously they want it to be, they're starting to get within the 107% rule, but if you're that far behind on race day, that's pretty worrying, right?
Well, they're getting lapped as well by the first pit stop.
Yeah.
And they're getting lapped 3 or 4 times a race, so it's a miracle they're not getting lapped more, because you can see the leaders have just come out of the pits, and then they've got a Marussia to overtake, and it's
they get a lot of coverage. They get a lot of TV coverage.
They do, but not in the way they'd probably want.
Not in a positive way.
They're not even participating in the in-season test that's going to occur this week in Catalonia.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but they won't be. So I don't know when they'll start to try and limit the number of times they get lapped in a race.
Yeah. So let's go on to the two Lotuses having a little bit of a scrap, and it was Grosjean really that got into the first corner a little bit too deep, a little bit too hot, ran wide, and then for some reason, I mean, yes, the sleeping policemen are there to slow cars down, but you can slow right down and make your way through safely. But he decided to launch himself over both sets of sleeping policemen, overshot the road again, ran wide, just as his teammate, and to be fair, once again for Pastor Maldonado, a passenger in another accident.
I think it was on Pastor, to be honest.
Okay,
I mean,
conflict.
was gutted because I obviously made the prediction on our podcast on Friday that he would finish in the points, and he had a cracking start to the race. He started 12th, and he was up into 7th, 8th place, so he was having a really great start, and he's proven he's got some racecraft and talent there. And then, as you say, when Grosjean did go wide and had his issue, that Pastor could go around the outside, but he closed the gap on Grosjean when Grosjean was already alongside him, so Grosjean had nowhere to go. So the rear right of Pastor and the front left of Grosjean touched quite a bit, which caused them both to fishtail, and that put a lot of energy through the rear of Pastor's car. And then I think on the following lap he overtook a Toro Rosso who were falling behind, and his rear wing snapped on when his DRS closed.
Yeah,
that was his race really over from there.
It was pretty bad, really, and it could have been a lot worse. I mean, the whole thing could have sheared off, really, but it just shows how strong those rear wings are, and on all the parts of the car are. And it's amazing just by that contact that it's affected the rear wing so much, because we see contact like that quite a lot, really. Mainly, it tends to be on the two front wheels, but a rear to front wheel. It's amazing how much damage that actually did to Pastor's car. Where I understand what you've said, and I saw it on the Sky Sports coverage, they said the same about leaving room, and I understand that. But my gripe with Grosjean is he ran wide at the first corner, and he decided rather than to take the safe route and maybe go round the whole sleeping policeman or try and meander through them like we saw Nico Hulkenberg do later on, he decided to floor it and go over those two sleeping policemen, which shot him into the road. Now, that's dangerous for me for two reasons. One, because when the car's off the ground, it's got no contact with the ground, therefore you are not in control of the car. So he's putting the car full blast over those sleeping policemen into oncoming or into traffic on the road. So he's potentially going to cause an accident there. And he would have been just safer just taking the punishment and going round and making it safe. So, and then when Pastor's gone round, obviously, yes, he could have left him a little bit more room, but I don't think Grosjean should have even been there in the first place, because if he had taken the evasive action that he should have done and gone round or gone slowly through the sleeping policeman, then he wouldn't have been there. But I take the point that Pastor should have left him more room. I just feel a little bit sorry for him, really, because he's driven so well in some races, and he seems to be the victim of other people's accidents.
Yeah, he's getting his name in there, and he is being the passenger for a lot of these accidents, but he is still there, which I think has something to do with it. But yeah, you're right, Grosjean was zigzagging all over the place and was a bit erratic there. But a lot of people with those sleeping policemen, they just drove straight over him, I think. I don't think they punished him much. We saw Alonso do it and a few other drivers do it. But yeah, so why Grosjean cut across the track in front of everyone rather than just staying to the outside and doing it that way? I'm not too sure, but he kind of did a Pastor and drifted round that first corner, didn't he?
Yeah, you know what I say to all that?
What's that?
Bring back gravel traps.
Yes.
Bring back gravel traps. Anyway, so we'll move on from that, and we'll go up front now from the two Lotuses having a scrap, and Hamilton's starting to complain to his race engineer that he can't get close enough to Vettel because of the turbulent air. They start talking about what they're going to do. Hamilton's engineer says, we're going to go to plan, but we're thinking about plan B, and Hamilton says we're going to have to go to plan B, and plan B being a 3-stop strategy.
Yeah, Lewis had a race of two halves today, to use a football analogy. The first half was his negative side and miserable side that we saw, and as you said, he was saying it was impossible to chase Vettel, and he was around a second behind Vettel for the majority of the first stint. And couldn't really get closer. He was in his turbulent air, and it was just annoying to see that every time on the straight he could catch up to him. Looks like he was just about to overtake him under DRS, and then he had to brake for the first corner. So a bit frustrating for Lewis there, and that just allowed Rosberg really to get away.
It did indeed, and then on lap 11 we see Hulkenberg make the first of the first lot of pit stops, if that makes sense. He's the first person to pit, basically, is what I should have said, and probably would have made more sense. And around lap 12, 13, we hear it for the first time this season. It's hammer time. It's hammer time. And Hamilton is encouraged to put the hammer down and get after Vettel. And then he's actually told on lap 13, after being told it's hammer time, to box and do the opposite to what Vettel does. So Lewis stops. What happens, Ben, is almost disastrous in terms of the race at that time.
Yeah, I was frantically scribbling down notes at that point, saying that it's Hamilton time and Hamilton was pitting, and then I looked up and the rear left was struggling to go on, and that cost Hamilton a bit of time. And then as Hamilton left his pit box after the start, I can't remember how long it was.
Too long.
Too long. Good answer. That's a driver's answer, that is.
Yeah.
He was just shaking his head, throwing his hand in the air, and it's just that frustrating thing to see. You're thinking, just happen, get on with it and go. And he actually did go, didn't he?
Yeah,
it was hammer time for the rest of the race after that.
Yeah, he did put the pedal to the metal. And I actually wrote he rejoined the race in 7th place, behind Maldonado, and I wrote gulp. Because it's after obviously Maldonado at that point had the damaged rear wing, and he's connected with a few people this year, so there's always a worry in the back of your mind when he joins in and around Maldonado. But luckily by turn 5 he dispatched of the Lotus and was on his way again. As you said, he was really putting the hammer down. But Vettel stopped again stopped for the first time on lap 15, and rejoined in front of Hamilton in 4th place. Hamilton then in 5th as Massa had stopped. So Ben, at that point, what are you thinking for Hamilton? Are you thinking it's going to have to happen on the track, or what do you think is going through Hamilton's mind?
Well, he started blitzing it at that point, didn't he? He was really going for it. They'd all put on the medium tyres because Rosberg pitted a lap after Vettel, and he came out second behind Raikkonen. But it did look like Hamilton would probably have to go on to the 3-stop strategy to test and put Vettel under pressure. Which I think is what they then came over the radio and said that we're going to have to go to plan such and such, or plan C or B, whatever it was. And
Z at this point, I think.
ZA probably, and prolong the stint, because otherwise as he proved in the first stint, he could probably catch Vettel, but passing him would have been a different issue altogether.
And then lap 16. The Lotus of Maldonado comes into the pits, and the Lotus this weekend has been sponsored by the Mad Max movie. And then when the engineers took to the rear wing and started ripping bits off it, it did look like something out of the Mad Max movie. They just ripped the side of the rear wing off there. And I'm surprised, really, that Maldonado then went on to last that long. Obviously, he did retire, which we'll get to later in the race. But I'm surprised I didn't see a black and orange flag there. I mean, it didn't look safe at all to me.
I wasn't. Again, another conflict between us. I wasn't.
What is it with you today?
It's probably that hunger. I'm just so hungry.
So grumpy right now.
For me, it looked stable enough. I mean, the wing had coped and proved that it could cope under the stresses of the aerodynamics, and it could remain on the rear of the car. It wasn't as if that rear end plate was flapping around at all. Although, I suppose you would argue that it could have failed and was more likely to fail. But I didn't see it as a massive issue, to be honest, and I'm not surprised that a black and orange flag wasn't waved at him or thrown at him.
Thrown at him.
Probably would have registered though if they'd thrown it at him and just waved at him.
Probably, yeah. Lap 17, Hamilton has another bit of a conflab with his engineer. He's told to attack Vettel, and he replies, "It is pretty much impossible, so you're going to need to come up with another solution." So he's telling his engineer that something else needs to happen. Now, when I was watching it on the pit channel as well on my iPad, they showed tweets from other people as well who were tweeting about the race. And Nigel Mansell gave a tweet, and he said, "Any driver can overtake if you push hard enough. Just takes some planning." So obviously Hamilton was pushing hard, and I think Nigel Mansell was sort of saying, just get on with it, because Nigel Mansell was also a bit of a king of the overtake. Do you think that realistically Hamilton would have been able to overtake Vettel if it came down to it?
Again, it comes back to me saying that Hamilton was in a race of two halves. In the first half, we had his mentality that nothing was going to go right for him today, and no, he was never going to overtake him. But as we saw later on, and only a few laps later, something clicked and snapped somewhere in his brain, and he just stepped on it. At that point, as we saw later on, he could then overtake people, and we know Hamilton can overtake people because he's proven that he can do it time and time again, and in difficult situations. So at that time, it wasn't looking that likely, but later on it was.
He is one of the best overtakers on the grid by far. Lap 18, Raikkonen pits for the hard compound and comes back into 5th. Raikkonen taking a different strategy to his teammate Vettel and doing what he did in Bahrain and running long in the middle there.
Yeah, that's the strategy that Ferrari are employing in the races. Is they're doing one strategy for one and one for the other. I'm not sure how much that plays into number one, number two status. But Raikkonen is tending to do the longer stints, but I think that's because he's more comfortable on the harder tyre. He can run longer and he can look after his tyres. So I think that's the main reason for that. And it proved not to be too bad for him today on that strategy.
It was just traffic was the main problem, we think, for Raikkonen today. Are they going to have to start banning engineers talking in corners? Because lap 18, Hamilton this time on the radio, try not to. He was very polite about it. He did say please twice, and he did sort of address his, please try not to speak to me in the corners, please. He said please twice. Very polite. And he wasn't the only person again today to say that.
Well, Catalonia, there's only one long straight, which is obviously the pit straight, and everything else is long sweeping corners. So that means that the engineers are just going to have to cram everything in on that pit straight, and then the drivers are going to complain even more, and then at that point they've got to try and overtake people. So it's the engineers really can't win, can they?
Your 3 points. I'm sorry, I didn't hear any of that. You have to wait
say
now.
again. Come on. And then, but at that point, Raikkonen's got to come over the radio and say, move this Marussia out of the way.
Well,
so there won't be enough time.
In a couple of bits' time, I've got a whole segment here about radio contact today, which was just off the scale today. All different drivers, all different things saying, and Raikkonen, what a potty mouth. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. I just wrote a quick note here. Red Bull's looking better than the Toro Rossos today. Now, it was alluded to that the Toro Rossos might have made a bit of a setup boo-boo and maybe tailored their car more for qualifying than the race, but the Red Bulls actually didn't look too bad today. They were pretty quiet in the whole grand scheme of things, but they did look good, and as my bold prediction came off, all 4 Renault cars finished the race. They
did indeed. I was waiting for the recovery truck to park up on the circuit to collect one of them, to be honest.
Yeah.
In particular, Ricciardo, who's had problems all weekend. But no, they all had a kind of a lonely race, really, apart from the Toro Rossos at the start. But the Red Bulls, no, they did pretty well. They brought a lot of updates, especially their nose, which they had to pass on the crash test for the umpteenth time. But that was kind of them pulling the wool over their eyes because they still need to fix their Renault engine rather than their aerodynamics. But
yeah,
no, good step forward for them this weekend.
Yeah, very good. Right, let's get into this radio content. I've been looking forward to this bit because there's some gems here. It's going to be difficult for me to pick my my radio contact of the day. So let's start.
You probably got a lot more than what we did on the main TV.
Man, there was so much more. Raikkonen swearing not once but twice today. The first one was, what is this bleep Marussia car doing? He's all over the place. Then later on, he came on the radio again. Get that Marussia out of the bleeping way. And then again, sorry, he did it 3 times. Hey, this bleeping Toro Rosso just came straight in front of me. But he didn't shout that one. He just went, hey, this bleeping Toro Rosso just came in front of me. That's exactly how he delivered it, as if to go, hey, what's going on here? What's this about? But that's just Raikkonen. What is wrong with Raikkonen? He's usually so calm and laid back, but he was just ripping people today. I mean, obviously he had a problem with traffic, but do you think there's any excuse for that sort of outburst?
I suppose as when you're in the racing seat, then tensions and emotions are a bit different to when you can think about it. So in that split second, then he's probably going to come out with a few swear words, but for me, it doesn't bother me whatever if he swears or not. But he's been doing that every race, hasn't he? Telling someone to get out of the way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how long it's going to be before he tells the actual car he's racing in front to get out of the way.
Hey, get out of the way.
Get out of the way.
I've got 2 more here, and this one came out over the television, so correct me if I'm wrong here about what was actually said. The engineer of Grosjean coming on saying, okay, Roman, you'll have to lift on the bad gear. Grosjean replying, fat chance. And then was it Alan Permain?
Alan Permain, yeah.
Alan Permain came on the radio. You'll have to, or you'll blow up the engine. And he's like proper shouting him at this point, like a naughty child.
It was very much like a naughty child and their parent, wasn't it? Because
Grosjean.
It was like the mother asking Grosjean very nicely, he said, lift when you come through the bad gear. And he's like, no. No, I'm not doing that. And then his dad had to come through and goes, "Oi, you're doing that, and if you're not, that's it. We're going to blow up the engine on purpose." But that was very entertaining, because I didn't actually hear what Grosjean said, because he's mumbling under his like, "No, I'm not doing that."
Yeah, he just come out and said, "Fat chance," and then Alan Permain going on, "What did you say?"
It's a bit like you with our dad.
Yeah.
Where you always used to say something, and then you say, "What did you say?" And you kind of you'd run away.
I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. So I mean, Grosjean today obviously had that bad bit of radio comms with his team, but he seemed to be a bit erratic today, all over the place. He ran wide. Here's his teammate. He didn't have a particularly clean race. Yes, he finished in the points and brought the car home, but not the cleanest drive. And then later on in the race, he had. Well, we'll talk about the pit lane stops in a minute, but he had that incident there. Just an off day for Grosjean, or sign of maybe that both Lotus drivers need to maybe take a step back and have a look at the way they're driving the car?
Pressure, I think. The car's made a small step forward. It's getting faster, and they've got nowhere to hide now. They've got no excuses. They've got a car that's going to get them consistently in the points. If Grosjean's actually shown every race, but they were struggling on Friday and Saturday with the car. As you know, we saw Grosjean in qualifying mucking it up in the end, and he could have probably got through to Q3. But I think it is just mainly just the pressure they're feeling, and Pastor just being Pastor.
Just being Pastor. So, it was a hard decision, but this is my radio talk of the day. It didn't come out on television, but you've heard me speak about Hulkenberg before on this podcast and his radio comms with his engineer. This is classic Hulkenberg from last year. His engineer comes on, and they're talking about strategy at this point because Hulkenberg's on the softer tyre. His engineer comes on and says, "Good news, the hard is looking poor," because they were wondering whether to go on the hard or stay on the soft or whatever. Hulkenberg interrupts and going, whoa, don't talk to me on the straights this time. So not the corners, don't talk to me on the straights, is what he said. His engineer came back and said, "Well, you'll have to wait for your answer then." He went, "Well, you have to wait for your answer then." So I'm not going to talk to you. And then
that's what I said, they can't win, can they?
No, they can't. And then Hulkenberg came back a little bit later. I didn't get this bit down, but Hulkenberg came back, sort of finished off the conversation about, okay, so it's a bit late now, we're on this tyre, blah, 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 blah. And then his engineer was just sort of, again, very flippant with him. He goes, "Well, this is what you've got. This is the situation you're in, Hulkenberg. Deal with it." They have a sort of love-hate relationship, I think, those two. But I thought that was brilliant the way he came back. He just went, "Well, you'll have to wait for your answer then." Almost like a scorned wife to her husband. Well, you're just going to have to not talking to.
What if we do ban radios? Then they just complain, "Talk to me."
Yeah. Why don't you
comfort me?
Why don't you talk to me? Well, the reason I'm not talking to you is because every time I do, you jump down my throat. So I'm not going to talk to you. But so that was my radio chat of the day. Nico Hulkenberg, back to classic Nico. And I encourage anybody who is fortunate enough to have Sky Sports F1 Courage and have a tablet to download the Sky Sports app and watch the Pit Lane channel. It is fantastic. Okay, so bench. Lap 27. A pretty scary moment for a McLaren mechanic, the guys at the front there. But how cool was he? How super cool was he? Yeah,
well, to build the story up for you, on the previous lap, Alonso went wide at turn 1, went over the sleeping policeman and carried on round. He pitted, and as he came into his box, his rear tyres failed, and then his front tyres then had to do all the work, and then they failed, so he massively overshot his pit box. But cool as a cucumber, the front jack man he actually just walked out the way. He didn't run or scarper. He just went, right, okay, you take out that jack, and that jack went flying, didn't it?
He ping-ponged it. Alonso had been on the radio saying he had brake problems. As you said, he ran wide at the first corner, and then it was terrifying, and he did just ping that jack out the way, and they retired it. Have you heard what caused the problem? Because I have. Have you heard what caused the problem?
Was there some kind of debris in his brakes?
It was a tear-off strip covering over the brake duct. So they don't know whether it doesn't know whether it was his own tear-off strip, but the drive. For those of you who don't know, the drivers on their helmets, on their visors, they have a series of tear-off strips, which when they get dirty or greasy, they just rip them off and discard them out the cockpit. And they're taught to try and throw them as far away from the car as they physically can when they're driving at 190 mile an hour, which obviously not easy at all. If you've ever tried throwing something out of your window, not that I ever encourage people to throw anything out the window, but if you ever tried sticking your hand out of the window at 70 mile an hour on a motorway, that's hard enough. So They're trying to do that at 190 mile an hour. It's a nightmare. But one of those got sucked onto the brake duct, covering it up, causing it to overheat, and then causing it to fail. And luckily for the McLaren Jackman, just stepped out of the way, and unfortunately for Alonso, he had to retire. And not a great race day. A good weekend overall, but not a great race day for McLaren.
No, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Button was complaining of struggling with the rear of the car. Every time he even touched the gas pedal slightly, he was getting rear wheel spin, and the car was wanting to just throw out completely, and he had understeer on top of that, and he was all the way back in 18th, considering he started
14th, 14th.
So having a stinker of a day, and then afterwards he was in the paddock, he was just saying that it was a bad day, and he doesn't envisage them ever getting points this season based on what they had today and this weekend.
Well, he hopes that this is just an off day.
He
says hopes, but I mean, McLaren looked to have made step forwards in the practice sessions and the qualifying session, qualifying 11th and 14th respectively.
Yeah.
But it just all went pear-shaped from there. Alonso looked fairly steady in the race. He looked pretty good. I mean, he was 14th when he retired, obviously, so he'd gone backwards. But yeah, not a great day for McLaren. Lap 33 then, Benj. Hamilton pits for the harder tyre, rejoins in 5th place, and this is when we really know for sure that they're on the three stop strategy. And Hamilton again putting the hammer down and starting to overtake cars on the track now.
He did have another slow stop though. It was
yes, yeah.
The Ferraris were in a different class there. They were putting out the 2.2, 2.3 second stop. Mercedes about 2.4, 2.6 for Rosberg anyway. But Hamilton, his second stop was in the 3.4 or something like that. So another rubbish lap. But again, something in Lewis's brain snapped altogether, and he really did put the hammer down. I'm just looking through my notes here. He came out 5th behind Kimi Raikkonen, and he already took him by turn 1. On the following lap, I think.
Yes, yeah.
So he got past him pretty quickly. Kimi didn't really make a fuss of it and just kind of let him through a bit. But he was just flying. I don't know if they put any fuel secretively in his pit stop and he put any kerosene in there or something, because he was setting 1:29.9s and he was 2.5 seconds quicker than Vettel at that point. He was just, you might as well just give him wings and let him fly around.
Yeah, absolutely. And the front-running cars he overtook, Bottas and Raikkonen, were on different strategies, fighting different people. Bottas and Raikkonen actually fighting each other. So both engineers had told them not to fight too hard against against Hamilton, because that's not who they were fighting. However, for him to put down those qualifying-esque laps, lap after lap after lap, to catch the cars, then overtake them safely, he was on it today, and he really wanted to catch Rosberg.
But testament to Mercedes as well, because you could tell that he was driving the balls off that car, but it looked no effort for him whatsoever. It looked like he was in a video game. And he was... What amazed me, I don't know if you caught this on the main feed, going round turn 2, I think it was. I think he might have been behind Vettel at that point. He was steering one-handed round there. And he was playing with his steering wheel.
Yeah, when he was
phenomenal.
Yeah, that takes supreme skill and supreme confidence in the car. Lap 42, another dilemma in the pits, this time for the Lotus of Romain Grosjean. Now, they've blamed this on, I think it was a dodgy gear and a slippery box. But Romain Grosjean, the front jackman for Lotus, not so lucky as the guy from McLaren who managed to step out the way. It could have been so much nastier than it was, but he catapulted this guy, just shot him across the pit box. Luckily for him, I'm going to write a post about this. How brave, for one, and how good are these jackmen?
Very. I mean, you've got a car, even in the pit lane, they're coming at you about
50 mile.
50 mile. Yeah, 50 mile an hour. So you're still stood in front of a Formula 1 car that's going at 50 mile an hour, and you're trusting them to just brake on the spot and not go any further than the marks on the pit box. But the jack went straight into his stomach and catapulted him in the air, as you say, and he tried to get up and for the team, not just to show his pride, but for the team. He tried to get up as quick as he could. He struggled a bit, but everyone else helped him, and he got there and he got back on with his job. You see that in some other sports. I mean, like footballers, they'd be down, they'd be rolling around screaming for the referee, even though there isn't a referee. They'd be screaming for the marshal, probably.
Yeah.
Or the steward. But yeah, he cracked on with it, and enabled Grosjean to carry on. But fortunately, he is okay. They took him to hospital on the track, not on the track, but in the facilities of the track, and he's fine. He's got what appears to be a sprained foot. He's in a wheelchair at the moment, so it's just going to be a few days off for him. So good news there, as it could have been a lot worse.
And he was seen icing his knackers.
Yeah.
Yeah, big old bag of ice on them. Cauliflower beanbag, boom. Big old swelling on them bad boys, bless him. But yeah, it's just testament to those guys, and they for me are the heroes of the day. They were, I mean, it just shows how brave those guys are for a car to be coming at you at 50 mile an hour, and then for you to just put all your trust in that man behind the wheel. Especially if you, again, the Lotus guys, arguably you have to be more brave because they've got Pastor Maldonado coming at them, and Roman Grosjean.
And he could come in sideways and take them all out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we have seen it in the past where it has gone severely wrong. And teams like Ferrari have tried this red light system and all this sort of thing. But
I don't know if you, sorry Dan, I don't know if you caught the qualifying show. They showed clips of previous Spanish Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And Johnny Herbert when he was in the pits, and the rear jack got caught on the rear of his car.
Yeah,
and he just drove away with it, flailing around in the rear of his car.
Yeah.
Much of the pit crew were trying to chase him down the pit lane to get it back.
Well, it was like Massa in, was it 2008? In Singapore, where he just drove off with the fuel hose still attached. Just decided, I'm leaving.
I can't waste time.
See ya. So, I mean, those guys, they've put a lot of restrictions on who can be in the pit lane now after what happened with that tyre a couple of years ago, bouncing down and hitting that cameraman. But, yeah, it's still testament to those guys, and hopefully he gets better soon. Obviously, as you said, he's got a bit of a sprained foot by the looks of it, and they're going to give him a couple of days off, so that's good. Well deserved for those guys. Yeah. So a big pat on the back for them. So they sent Grosjean out again. Vettel had pitted just before that. Sorry, we missed that out. Vettel had pitted before and rejoined the race in 4th place. So that was his last stop of the race.
And I think Lewis managed to get past Bottas on lap 39 as well.
Yeah.
And catching Vettel at the rate of knots.
That's right. Then Grosjean, after coming out of the pits, after having that dilemma, made an absolutely amazing move round the outside at turn 1 on Danny Kvyat.
Yeah, I put beautiful move from Grosjean on Kvyat into turn 1. Very, very good, and what he needed to do considering how much time we'd lost from the rest of the race. Again, another switch that must have gone off in his head somewhere to put his foot down and get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that was good to see from Grosjean. As I said earlier, he had a bit of a scrappy race, but that really sort of showed that he has got good quality and he is a good driver. Danny Kvyat a bit of a sitting duck there for that one. Rosberg stops on lap 45. Hamilton then goes into the lead, but we know that Hamilton has to make that one more stop. So it was sort of that was the time when really Hamilton had to really sort of put the hammer down again and see how much of a gap he could pull out on Rosberg with dying tyres towards the end of the race. It didn't look at this point like it was going to happen for him.
No, I was cheering when I did see Hamilton come out in front, but really he was chasing and racing Vettel, and he just needed to pull out that gap of a pit stop so that when Vettel did pit, Hamilton would just say, when Hamilton did pit, he would come out still ahead of Vettel, and it was still hammer time, hadn't stopped at all, and he was just nailing lap after lap after lap, and he just pulled away from Vettel. Not so much Rosberg managed to stay with him, but Vettel just fell back into the distance on that one.
Couldn't keep pace.
I think he came out 17 seconds ahead of Vettel after his pit stop, and it was in the 40s, I think, by the end of the race or something like that.
Just couldn't keep pace today. Could not keep pace. Lap 47, Pastor Maldonado finally comes in to retire the car due to the rear wing. Again, a good race sort of for Pastor. He drove pretty well, didn't make too many mistakes, and was a bit of a victim of the clash with Grosjean, and unfortunately had to retire because he was looking at points again, but he's still pointless, still a pointless driver.
More ways than one.
Lap 51, Hamilton boxes. He says his tyres are still good, but he's told to come in. On the exit of the pits, the conversation between his engineer is very interesting, isn't it?
Which bit was that?
The part where he's asking how far ahead is Rosberg.
Yes.
Is it impossible to catch him?
At the beginning of the race, it was it's impossible to catch Vettel. It's impossible. I can't do it. It's impossible. Is it possible? Are you sure it's impossible that I can't catch Rosberg? Which I love, because it meant he was going to give everything he's got to try and catch Rosberg, even though, provided nothing happened, it was impossible for Hamilton to catch Rosberg, because he needed 2 seconds or more a lap, which he wasn't going to be able to do for the whole 16 laps. But bless him, he still tried, and he kind of ignored those orders and just kind of went for it until 4 laps the end. He thought, I'm just going to have to save my tyres and car and just admit defeat and come second.
Yeah, I mean, he made a very interesting comment in the interview with, I think it was Natalie Pinkham, after the race in the old pen outside, talking about the engineer calling the race. I mean, the engineer had given him a time of death. He'd called it completely. He said, this race is finished. Hamilton says that will never happen again. He has categorically come out and said that will never happen again. A race is never over. So I think it depends what day you catch Hamilton on, because sometimes he's like, yeah, we'll give up and whatever, it's over. And then I think because Rosberg had taken away the 5th consecutive pole from him, he was in the lead. I think Hamilton was a bit more riled up and a bit more PO'd at Rosberg this time, and really wanted to catch him and prove that Hamilton was king. But for today, it was Nico.
Yeah, Ted Kravitz of Sky Sports F1 said during his notebook after the race that Hamilton said about the decision for him to come in for the 3rd stop. Hamilton said it wouldn't have been good, and Kravitz said, is that because his tyres wouldn't have lasted, or it wouldn't have been good for the team and the relationship between them, or would it have caused a spark? Would it have caused Rosberg to say, hang on, he's just disobeyed the team order, what punishment is he going to get?
Yeah.
So that could have been interesting. I personally would have loved him to stay out as long as his tyres were up to it.
But he guaranteed himself 2nd place.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have been able to hold on to 1st place with Rosberg on fresher tyres. I think he would have struggled. Yeah. Then, excuse me a second, I'm going to have to cough. Do excuse me.
Lovely.
Sorry about that. Freudian slip of the day goes to Crofty when he called Bottas.
Brundle said we'll have to call him Valtteri from now on.
Yeah, we'll just stick to Valtteri. So yeah, that was. I just had to make a note of that because that did make me chuckle. And then on lap 63 is when Kimi Räikkönen. Sorry, I'm going back to the radio talk. That's when Kimi Räikkönen said his piece about the Toro Rosso, which I won't repeat. Lap 66, the final lap. Sainz and Kvyat coming together. They finished at the minute. They, as far as I know, they're finishing 9th and 10th with Sainz in 9th, Kvyat in 10th. Do we think that's going to get reversed? Because it was a pretty naughty move from Sainz. I
think Sainz is under investigation, so we'll have to keep our eyes peeled and see what happens. I will actually check. Peeled? Yes, our eyes peeled.
Our eyes. So if you know how to peel ice, if you could keep your eyes peeled, and
contact us and let us know. I'd be very interested for one to know.
Keep your eyes peeled, people.
And there's nothing on the website yet, so for the minute, Saints 9th, Kvyat 10th. I didn't really see much in it, to be honest. Maybe Sainz was a bit too far over, but
I just think it was genuinely a bit cheeky, a bit naughty. It was a bit of a late move. He forced him out, and there was obviously contact there. So I think
that was to do with the passion of it being his home race, and he wanted to do it for the crowd. He wanted to finish not just 10th and get the 1 point. He wanted to do as much as he could.
Yeah, but we'll see.
I understand it from that point.
So Rosberg crosses the line, the victor, his first race win of the season, with Lewis Hamilton in 2nd and Vettel closing out the podium in 3rd. Good win for Rosberg, Benj?
It's a win he needed, not necessarily one he would have had if Hamilton hadn't have messed up on the opening lap. I feel.
So you feel that if Hamilton had have got going on the first lap there and not lost the place to Vettel, that he would have won the race?
Yes.
Okay, but this is going to be a good confidence booster for Rosberg, and it puts the ball now in his court, going into one of his favourite races, which is Monaco. Of course, is technically his home race. Yeah,
and we saw what happened last year in qualifying.
He knows all the good parking places.
So he doesn't need a parking permit.
No.
So we'll have to see how Hamilton goes into Monaco as well. It'd be very interesting to see. I don't think anything will happen.
No.
but it'll be very interesting and see what momentum Rosberg will carry. He said that he did nothing different this weekend, which might be true because Hamilton seemed to be on a bit of a downer, and people might be blaming that on his busy schedule in the 3-week break with like the Mayweather fight and PO events here and there. PO events?
P&O Ferries.
P&O Ferry events.
If they want to sponsor us,
he's now doing cruises. Yeah.
Yeah, if P&O want to sponsor us, email at fivelightspodcast.com, and then we're happy to open that sort of line of conversation. So P&O Ferries.
We can do our podcast from the deck.
We can do the deck from the deck.
Yes,
with an E. So the final classification then for the Spanish Grand Prix: Rosberg winning. Hamilton was second, Vettel third, and then Bottas beating Raikkonen in fourth with Raikkonen fifth. Massa coming home in sixth with Ricciardo seventh, Grosjean finishing in eighth, and then as we said, Sainz currently in ninth with Kvyat in 10th, but we're expecting that probably to be reversed. Verstappen unlucky finishing 11th just outside the points, then Felipe Nasr, then Perez, Ericsson, Hulkenberg in 15th, Button 16th after an awful day for him, driving an absolute monster by the sounds of it. Then Will Stevens in 17th and Roberto Merri in 18th, with Alonso and Maldonado not classified as they both retired. Ben, how does that leave us in the drivers' standings?
Well, Hamilton still remains on top at the moment, although his lead has taken a bit of a blow by 7 points. So Hamilton number 1 on 111 points. 20 points behind him is Nico Rosberg, and then 11 points behind Rosberg is Sebastian Vettel. So the top 3 remain in the same as before the race, but a bit closer together. Kimi Raikkonen is 4th, some way behind Vettel on 52 points. Bottas is on 42 points, so only 10 behind Raikkonen. So they're going to be fighting each other throughout the season. In 6th place behind Bottas is Felipe Massa on 39 points. 7th place is Daniel Ricciardo on 25 points. 8th is Romain Grosjean on 16. 9th is Felipe Nasr with 14 points. And then 10th and 11th is Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen. They are on 7th and 6th respectively. 12th is Nico Hulkenberg on 6 points as well as Daniel Kvyat in 13th. He's also got 6. 14th and 15th is Sergio Perez and Ericsson. They're both on 5 points. And from 16th to 20th, they all have no points. And that is Fernando Alonso, Jenson Button, Pastor Maldonado, Roberto Merri, and Will Stevens.
The pointless drivers at the back there. Constructors' Championship then, that changes ever so slightly, with Mercedes still on top with 202 points and Scuderia Ferrari still in second, just 70 points behind them. Williams remain in third with 81 points, 121 behind is what I meant to say. Red Bull are in fourth with 31. Sauber fifth with 19 points, still that 1 point away from my bold prediction. I've got a horrible feeling that they are going to score 19 points and they will not score a single point for the rest of the year.
And I've just put them on my fantasy team.
I've got a horrible feeling that that's going to happen now. Lotus in 6th with 16 points. Toro Rosso are in 7th on 13 points. And the last point-scoring team are the Sahara Force India F1 team with 8 points, with McLaren and Marussia both with no points in 9th and 10th place. So, Ben, a few quick questions. Who are your biggest losers, your biggest winners, and your driver of the day?
Well, I'll start with driver of the day. I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton. Yes, he did make the big boo-boo at the start, but...
Technical term.
Yes, technical term, boo-boo. The second half of the race, he was on it, and he was in hammer time, and like the Hamilton we're used to seeing, and he was unbeatable on pace today. He was setting fastest lap after fastest lap, and to come back and finish second, and by quite a margin as well, and finish not so far behind Rosberg was that took quite a bit to do today, and no one else I didn't think matched him. So if he didn't have that boo boo at the start, he would have won that for me.
For me, it's going to be a little bit sort of not controversial, because I think Hamilton had an awesome race today, and I think he was supreme. I think actually though, for me, Rosberg is the driver of the day, because he led from the front. At no point did he sort of crack under pressure. He was very calm on the radio. Yes, it is sometimes easy to lead from the front, get the car out, and you're away. But at no point did he sort of crack. He wasn't asking over the radio frantically, what's Lewis doing, what's Lewis doing. He just got on with the race, finished the race, won it, and yeah, so for me, he was the driver of the day, because it's a much improved Rosberg from the very beginning of the season. Ben, biggest loser.
Is this from the weekend or just the race?
From the weekend. Let's do from the weekend.
The biggest losers for me from the weekend are going to be Force India, Sauber.
Wow.
I'm probably going to say McLaren, Honda as well, because they've fallen behind quite a bit.
Triple threat there. Triple threat.
Triple threats. Force India haven't been able to do any updates. Sauber also haven't brought any updates this weekend, so they're not going to be able to fight. I don't know what they've got planned for the future. As I think I've mentioned on previous podcasts, Force India are going to be bringing something for Austria, or after Austria, between Austria and Silverstone. And McLaren Honda seem to be making a lot of progress and slowly now reaching a plateau and maybe even going backwards. So yeah, not great weekends for either of them. No. And maybe even Ferrari as well. They tried to throw the kitchen sink, the bathroom and the garden shed at their car, and I think putting too much on the car at once meant that they didn't know what was working and what wasn't working.
See, you stole mine now, because you're always doing this. Ferrari were going to be my biggest losers because of what you've just said. They obviously used up the tokens, they put loads of changes to the car, they were talking it up, they were making inroads in the previous races into Mercedes, but this weekend just proved how dominant Mercedes are without really changing that much, if anything, to their car. And Ferrari have actually taken a step back rather than a step forward, I feel, this weekend, because they just weren't anywhere in touch. The first couple of stops, yes, Vettel was in front, but that was more down to a Mercedes mistake and the conditions of the Spanish Circuit de Catalunya, where it's difficult to overtake, rather than anything that Ferrari specifically were doing. And even Raikkonen was struggling to overtake the Williams of Bottas at the end there. Yes, he caught him, but he couldn't get past him. So Ferrari, for me, are the biggest losers. And I'm going to jump in now with my biggest winner before
I steal your thunder.
Before you steal my thunder. And it's Renault, for me. It's Renault. They got all four cars across the line. Yes, they weren't particularly fast and they weren't up there, but they got all four cars finished. And there was a good fight between Toro Rosso and Red Bull, actually. It was a good little tussle there. Yet again, I love watching this Red Bull Toro Rosso fight. So my biggest winners this weekend are the Renault engine supplier, because they managed to get all four of their cars finished.
Yeah, that's not a bad winner to choose. My biggest winner is Mercedes, because they, unlike Ferrari, they said we're going to go with quality over quantity, and that's worked for them. What they brought and what they put in the car has been really good, and they knew it was going to work, and they've opened up the gap again to Ferrari. So all that hard work that Ferrari did to try and close the gap to Mercedes has now been opened up again, and maybe Mercedes is just toying with them now. So yeah, Mercedes are my biggest winner for this weekend.
So overall, Ben, out of 10, how do you rate this Grand Prix?
I'm going to give it a 6.
Okay.
And a half.
6.5. Okay, I was going to give it. I was going to give it a 7. Actually, I was going to give it a 7. Yes, it didn't have the dynamic on-track racing that we saw in Malaysia, but it's just added. Like I said at the start of the podcast, Rosberg's got his first win of the season. It's got Hamilton riled up. It can only be a positive thing. And the gap, considering that Lewis has won all those races and has been dominant over Rosberg, the gap is now only 20 points. It's still within reach for Rosberg. The season hasn't gone away from him, and that's actually a good thing that Bernie Ecclestone has changed. Is the points award system means that it can be like this, that you can still be in touch. So that's great to see. So 2 weeks now, unless Benjamin, you've got anything else to say about the Spanish Grand Prix?
No, apart from the in-season test that will take place this week, I've got nothing else to add.
Okay, so 2 weeks now until the next Grand Prix, which is in Monaco. Monaco. I'll get into that in the next podcast. I know it's a popular one amongst people.
Yeah, we'll need a podcast just for that.
Yeah, Monaco. So anyway, Monaco's in 2 weeks' time, so there's another gap. Bear with it, there was another gap. We should be back a week on Thursday to preview Monaco, but if there's another influx of news, then we will come back. We've got a few things planned, so we're going to try and get the Marshal from Silverstone on. That would be great. If you are involved in F1 in any way, if you're a member of a team or a club, or if you love F1 and you want to come on the show, send us an email at 5lightspodcast.com. Hit us up on Twitter at 5lightspod, or follow us on Facebook, 5lightspodcast, and send us a message, send us a tweet, send us an email. You can either comment on our blog posts on the website, 5lightspodcast.com. Send us a message, and we'd love to talk to you and perhaps get you on the show so you can talk about your love of F1 as well. Ben, great biting point last time. A little bit of a preview as to what your biting point this week is going to be, or are you still sort of toying with an idea?
I'm still an ahhing. With an empty stomach, it's hard to think straight. So just look forward to it tomorrow, and I'll surprise you all.
Surprise.
But it won't be about food, so don't worry.
No. I'm going to be writing a Dan's takeaway, hopefully soon.
Don't say takeaway.
Brilliant. At some point. Sorry I haven't written one so far, but I will be writing one at some point soon. Head over to the Five Lights Podcast website for anything. So where you can download the podcast from, where you can subscribe to. Our friends over at the Flat Out Fever podcast in Canada. They've not got long now to wait for their race. And also the guys to the On The Limit podcast as well. The links to all their stuff on there. There's the blogs. There's the calendar where you can get tickets to any Grand Prix thanks to bookf1.com. And there's also the experience days you can get on there as well. Videos are on there. You can get this podcast on YouTube, Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes, SoundCloud, various other places as well. But we shall be back a week on Thursday to look ahead to the Monaco Grand Prix. Ben, anything to finish up?
I hope you enjoyed the race, and hopefully the 2 weeks goes quick for you before Monaco. Although it is Monaco, it's still a race, and I look forward to it nonetheless.
Yes, indeed. So now we're going to finish, as we always finish. Last time we did one of these Maury Walker readings, it was like a Bible reading at the end. It was quite a nice end to the service. So I've picked one. I've looked through this little book here, and I've picked one out that sort of sums up the weekend. So Ben, let me know what you think. This is Maury Walker, and he said, "A black race for the grey and black McLaren. A black race for the grey and black McLaren." And I think that sort of sums up the race, really, for McLaren. It was a black race with the grey and red, pinky, orange, whatever it is, McLaren.
Yeah,
so that's
all
it.
Different colours to me.
Well, kaleidoscope of colours to you over there, buddy. So that's it from the Five Lights Podcast. Episode 14 is in the books. Race 5 is in the books. And Nico Rosberg finally has his first race of the season. The season is hotting up. Well, that was hotting up for those who didn't understand. That's it. Five Lights Podcast. The 5 lights have gone out. See you later, guys.
Bye, guys.